is a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living Well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Welcome to Living Well, where we attend to the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul. Is dating a challenge for you? I mean, there are so many ways that we quote unquote date nowadays. You got online dating. I don't even know, do people still meet in the grocery store, at the gas station anymore? You got being introduced by friends, or dating a co-worker, and none of it is working out. Maybe that's not you. Maybe it's a friend who can't seem to find dates or is having difficulty in relationships. Well, we are continuing our relationship and dating series today. And what we want to do is we want to bring in a male perspective. We need to get some of that testosterone in the room to help us understand how men and women date differently. So if this is you, or if you know someone, stay tuned, get a pen, write it down, and be ready to live accordingly. Welcome to Living Well. Now, for those of you who've been around for a while, you know what time it is. It is time for the water cooler conversation, where we come out of our offices, convene around the water cooler, and talk about hot topics in the news or social media, or what's just going on in life. And I think you all are gonna wanna stick around and hear what we're talking about today. We got a clip for you though, so let's go right to it.
So do you feel like even though there's a yes that happened because you guys both swiped right, and so there's the yes that happens, they're still treating you like a maybe?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, because the other comment that I got when I actually did go on a date, which turned out to be all right, was, you're actually more kinder than I thought you would be, or you're actually more intelligent than I thought, even though you didn't go to college. And I was like,
wait, huh?
is that a compliment or is that a backhanded compliment? And that's like what is happening during a first impression, is you're having to almost check yourself too and saying, did this person really just say this to me? And then still try to get to know this person and see if they are a possible mate.
I will say for me, it's more on the difficult side, because I feel like I do get a lot of matches, but then it's just like it never like propels to the next step, and it's just difficult to get those dates in general. And so that's like definitely been my area of struggle.
Once you start that inner work of the self-love and accepting all of who you are, right? And we talked about before we started therapy, right?
Yeah.
I gotta throw that in there. But making sure that you're in a space to say, you know what, I accept all of who I am, and that's the only way that I'm going to be able to attract someone who's going to accept all of who I am, because I'm in that right space. So I would tell that person to work on themselves, work on that self-love, and at least that's the first part of the process.
Now that was interesting. That's the woman's perspective, but I think we need to get a male's perspective up in this conversation.
Absolutely.
So we got another clip for you. Let's hear what the men are sitting around talking about.
What do we desire in your significant other? Characteristics, like...
I would say, for me, trust, communication, and faith are probably the three that work for me. I
you sure you're not married?
Right. That's how he answered this question.
Jewels like a married man.
I say that only because the physical part, like that's kind of a given.
Table stakes.
That's your initial attraction to the person anyway. But
so you're talking about
those, for me, like those three things, like I gotta have. Now, she's gotta be intelligent. She's got to, have. I gotta enjoy being around her, like as a person. But those are probably the 3 things that I look for. Like somebody I can trust, somebody I can communicate with, somebody I can share.
Question: as the single guys here, do we have too many characteristics or attributes that we need to check off to make someone our girl? Do you think you had that?
Is 3 too many?
No. I'm saying. I'm just asking. Like, is that the reason why we're single, or are we not focused?
I'm picky, but I don't.
I'm just
think
curious because you know that it can be twisted around the other way all the time. They're like, so we can say some women are too picky, and that's why they may not have a
Women do
man.
be too picky.
So I'm just curious. What do you? I mean,
I think as long as she's spiritually, physically, and mentally fit, you know, I'm solid with that. And I think timing is everything, though. I think timing is everything, and I think that's why I'm still in the position that I'm in right now. I think God is like, you know what? It's not the right time. Nowadays, I don't know, like the women aren't that interesting. You know what I'm saying? The aesthetics get old.
damn, you in LA saying that, huh?
The aesthetics get old. Yeah, honestly, because it's just like, I mean, you see the same thing. It's like all the girls, they look alike. Everybody, they dress alike, they put the same makeup, they put the same everything on.
Fenty.
But it's like, what I look for is like what's underneath it, and not many people have like something of substance, because we're all like materially obligated to like phones and internet and
Right.
how many followers, how many likes. So it's like people aren't real humans anymore.
Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Yes. So, okay, so we saw the woman's perspective first. So I think let's kind of start there. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts as they talk about how difficult it is to get a date, what the men are saying on dates?
You know, first of all, this idea, I don't know nothing about the online dating. That is definitely not, you know, my world.
Oh, but that's my lane. That's
well,
my lane.
so,
yes.
you know, but also, you know, when I think about it, and the women are talking about when they meet somebody, and, you know, like the young lady talks about the guy asking her making the statement, oh, you're kinder than what I thought, or I think she said she felt like his comment was a backhanded comment, and it's twofold for me, because on one perspective I was like, okay, well, I mean, how kind am I supposed to look? So I could actually kind of understand what she means, feeling like maybe it's a backhanded compliment or something. However, like we were talking, he could just that's his criteria. And so the man, he has criteria as well, in terms of maybe he wanted somebody who, you know, I don't know, had an education or had a degree or something like that.
Oh, you're talking about the other comment where he says, oh, you're smarter than I thought.
You're smarter than I thought, yeah.
You know, sometimes I think that in dating as women, and I don't want to bash women.
Right.
You know, I'm a woman. I dated all through my 30s before I got married again. So, you know, it hasn't been that long. Well, you know, I'm a couple of steps from 30, but I'm just saying, it hasn't been that long, right? It hasn't been that long.
You're right.
I've only been married this second time for 12 years. So, you know, I've just been out of the dating game a short period of time. And sometimes I think we take ourselves too seriously in dating.
Yeah.
Sometimes because we don't know the person. And especially if we may have trust issues, or we already have this idea or sense that I'm waiting for this person to do something to mess up, that we can use that lens to interpret things that might be kind of neutral or benign remarks, right? That weren't meant to be cutting, but you felt it that way because you don't know them. Generally, when you know someone, you know their heart, you know where they're coming from, you give them a little more space, right? Space and grace. And I'm just thinking, like, you know, I dated online. So yeah, your pictures can tell you a lot about a person. So do you have pictures online that are very serious, or headshots, and, you know, you're standing there? Or do you have pictures, some showing you laughing, showing you in social situations? Those kinds of things can give a person a feel. And as you said, I'm sorry, maybe your criteria, what is your criteria for meeting someone if you have an online profile? Is it that you want, like, for example, was she looking for, did she say something like she's looking for a guy who has a career, who's making a certain amount of money, who's driven, who likes to travel? If you have those kinds of criteria, then 9 times out of 10, that person is going to have some level of education or have worked themselves up through their company, so they're intelligent, they're smart. So they're looking for someone to kind of match that. I might kind of see it as a compliment to say, oh, even though you don't have this next level of education, you're really smart and intelligent. So, you know, and I'm not saying that she's wrong. I'm just saying there's multiple ways to look at this thing.
Yeah, you're right. I would definitely agree with that, especially if maybe she hasn't dated. Maybe she hasn't been on the dating scene for, you know, a while. Maybe she hasn't had enough dates. And so
or maybe she's had a lot and they've all failed and that's why she feel that way.
Well, okay. You know, I was just really trying to be optimistic about the thing. That's all I was just trying to do. You know, but the perspective matters. It really does, especially when you're out on the dating scene and you're interacting with different people. Your perspective matters because it could make or break whether or not you, like the one girl said, moving on to the next level. I don't know. The dating on the social media dating, that ain't my lane.
Right, online. But I don't think it's any different than dating someone, you know, that you meet at the grocery store. Like, people put these categories. Oh, you met online. Oh, you met, you know, in a grocery. Oh, you were introduced to friends. All of them are you interacting with a person who you've never met before.
Absolutely.
I don't even consider online, I don't consider it online dating. I don't even use that term. I use online meeting. So we met online, but you don't start to date until you're in that person's space.
You're right.
And you see how you interact and what it feels like organically. And like to the other young lady who was saying she gets these swipes, but they never manifest into dates. I also think that having an online dating profile should just be one avenue. That you don't put all of your eggs into, I'm going to meet these people online or through the internet or social media.
Right.
That you can't put that's one avenue. I have a profile out there, but I'm still going to places where I can meet and interact with other folks
people
that might be, you know, potential dates.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's, you know, that's something that we have to be mindful of. Online or having an online profile is not the end all be all. And as I said, I online dated. I met my husband, who's a wonderful person. We met online. We started dating afterwards. But let's talk about the men for a second. We just got a second to talk about the men. So, you know, this criteria. You know, I have to say, the one young man, like he said he got 3 criteria. And they weren't bad. Like,
they weren't. He sounds like a man who really knows what he wants. He sounds like a man, his criteria really spoke to substance. And that's what was really important for him, as it should be for all. But that's what I heard. You know, substance matters. But that's what I heard from the young, you know, the young guy when he talked about the 3. And I'm like, that's a good point.
Wouldn't it be amazing if those 5 young men sitting around that table connected with the 4 young women that were on the couch? Like,
we got a match.
Right, exactly. I mean, you know, have a social.
Exactly, and just engage in conversation. You'd be amazed at, you know, she might have went in looking at candidate number 4, and by the time the conversation was over, she ended up with candidate number 2.
You never know. I think that we have to create opportunities to connect.
Absolutely.
I think we have to be open-minded, and we have to go into it with fun. We have to be fun and show those various parts of our personality rather than sitting back being like, okay, I'm looking at you through a fine-tooth comb and I'm going to interpret everything that you say. And, you know, I don't know. We talk about like the young man who said the woman has to be spiritually and mentally and physically fit.
Yes.
Like, but what does that mean, young man? Like, what does that mean? And, you know, if she got 10 extra pounds, is she then not fit? Like, so there's a lot that goes into that. But sometimes we have to kind of pull back, be open-minded, have fun, and most importantly, I think we have to believe that that person can be out there.
Absolutely.
Who's for us.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% because I was going to say, you know, the whole idea of having fun when we go out and dating. But you know what? We might save that for another topic when you talk more about your book.
Right. We have fun and date. You know what? I think we need to stop right here because we are 2 women and I think we need a male perspective on this. So let's cut over, get our guest who is an amazing licensed marriage and family therapist. So we're going to go ahead and welcome Jeffrey Williams to our set. Here we go. I am so excited because we have a fabulous guest who has joined us to give us the male perspective. Now, you know we need some testosterone in here to help us unpack all of this. So without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Jeffrey Williams, licensed marriage and family therapist. He also works as a counselor at Pepperdine University. So you're working with all of the young adults who are going through this relationship up and down. And also man's website, buildingqualityrelationships.com. We'll also make sure that we repeat that again at the close of the show for people who want to find you. So thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Right. And even though there's two women here, we're going to try not to put you on the hot seat.
All right. we'll see how well that goes. Right?
Now, given that you have your private practice, so you work with people in private practice, you also are engaged in the marriage ministry here at Faithful Central Bible Church in Inglewood, and you work at a university with young adults who are trying to figure out this dating thing as well. I'm quite sure that you run into, or you have all kinds of stories about dating and relationships. And I'm wondering, like, what are some of the common themes that you're seeing now in this new millennium, you know, that men and women are dealing with?
Absolutely. I think the themes that just come up for me when you say that is it's communication, it's sex, it is trust, it is raising children, and it is money. It's those big ones. You know, especially around communication. I'm beginning a lot of that lately. And usually communication is a euphemism for conflict resolution.
Right.
And so it is trying to help clients work through their conflict. And usually one of the things that I do is focus on what I call rules of engagement, right? And it is, you know, even when people go to war, they have rules on how they're going to fight and where they're going to have combat. And I think we've got to do that in relationships too. You know, what are some of those things that you just can't say or can't do or when we are fighting? And making sure that everyone agrees on that during a time where there is no conflict, of course, and then sticking to that. I can talk about sex. It depends. If you're talking about the serious Christian in a dating relationship, right? It's like, how are we handling celibacy? Are we handling celibacy, right? It is for those that are married, sometimes it is the issues with porn and those kind of things. That's a theme that continues to come up. I can talk about trust. Trust is a big one. Usually has to do with, are you going to do what you say? Can I believe you? Are you who you say you are? Especially young women in the dating space. It is like they've got this term now that they call love bombing, right? Where it's just like guys are so over the top with affection and attention and things of that nature. And then they do that to get what they want. And then shortly thereafter, they're done. And so I can talk about raising children. Raising children, what usually happens is if you're in a long-term relationship or if you're married, marital and relationship satisfaction dips usually during the years. Most studies will say that, right? And so because of that, it's not because we shouldn't have children, or the Bible talks about children being a blessing, right? It's not about that, but it's hard, and it taxes the relationship during that time, and then of course money. How do we spend it? Who spends it? Who's the best person to manage it? A lot of times gender roles come up during this time, like, well, if I make this money, then I should have this say, or I should have a lot of power dynamics come up in the relationship. So those are the things that come up.
Now you dropped a whole lot of gems, right? So there's a lot to unpack there. I'm just thinking about, you starting off with communication and this idea of rules of engagement. I know that when I'm working with with couples, I'll use some of the biological science that says that once your heart rate gets to 100 beats a minute, you are at the point of no return. Meaning that once you're at 100 beats a minute, you're kind of having a trauma response where your frontal lobe, which this front part of your brain, which is responsible for like understanding consequences, planning, executive functioning, all of that kind of shuts down and you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And once you get to 100 beats a minute, your body kind of takes over and now your mind is like, I just want to fight. I just need to fight or flee, or freeze. And so I'll tell couples, if you have wear activity tracker like I do, that when your heart rate, if you're getting into a conversation and it starts to escalate, and when that heart rate gets to 90, you need to walk away. Walk away and take a time out and kind of gather yourself. And the timeout is not meant for a time for you to better your argument, right? Come up with all your points and why you were right, but really take a time out to say, I'm not going to get my needs met if I attack or if we have this argument. The outcome is not going to be what I want it to be. So let me calm down and think about how we can reapproach this rationally, right? So I tell couples that all the time. But as you mentioned, communication is usually a euphemism for something else, right? That's going on. So really trying to get to the root of what's happening that's impacting your ability to relay to your mate that message that you want. But you named like the big five, right? And communication is just one. I know in the counseling center, we see that come up a lot.
Yeah, we do. Especially, it's interesting because we all think we're good communicators. And that's something that I often share with the couple as well. I know you feel like you are the best communicator, but, people don't, it's interesting to try to get our couples to understand that communication is not just about getting your point across. When you're communicating, and we know it involves listening, but are you listening to understand? And it's so interesting when you engage your couples in that conversation, they're like, oh, I have to understand, but right now I want him to understand me, or I want her to understand me. And so the communication really does evolve into so much more.
And along those lines, because you mentioned trust and child rearing and finances, along those lines, do you see that men and women approach relationships different, approach dating different, even approach those, 5 factors that you mentioned? Do men and women kind of approach this thing differently?
Absolutely, we do. I think because we just approach life differently. So of course we approach relationships differently, right? And so one of the things that I think that comes up is just even how we approach a relationship. And I'm going to speak in general terms.
Okay.
Excuse me. I'm going to speak in general terms, but oftentimes women they understand they want to be in a relationship, they want to be married, and they are just looking for the person to complete that picture, right? And men, generally speaking, they're on the fence about being in a relationship. They're not completely sure oftentimes, but are looking for that perfect person, that person that they can't live without. And just that difference in how you're approaching it will impact how you interact in that relationship.
Wait. I got to stop you right there because that's really profound. Because what I heard you say, now correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you say is basically women are looking for someone who they can live with, and men are generally looking for somebody that they can't live without.
Absolutely.
Now that's deep. I've never heard it put that way before. Now, but I can see it. I'm thinking about the couples that I've seen. I'm even thinking about myself, and I'm like, I see it.
Absolutely. Men are looking for that person that's going to overwhelm them, knock them off their feet, and it's just like, okay, I think that's a person that I might want to be with.
Now,
You're going to change somebody's life.
Exactly.
Now, change all the relationships.
Because I'm just thinking about, some relationships that I know of and, some that I've worked with over the years. And might that explain why I know several couples where the man, let's say, has dated women 3 women or something like that, and he dated one woman for 3 years, never married her, dated another woman for 2 years, never married her, dated somebody for 6, and then, for 6 years, never, and then he meets this woman, and within a year, they're walking down the aisle. And the other women are like, well, why you never married me? We were together for a long time.
He was waiting to get knocked off his feet and figure out, like, I can't live without this person. I've got to lock this down.
Wow.
That really is profound.
I got to drink some water.
Right. Because, so, you're right. Now, when you think about that, think about all the people who just heard that golden nugget. Now, the approach is like completely different. The approach is different. Will we see more women coming in with the wow factor? Like, okay, I'm trying to knock you off your feet. That might be the takeaway. But as I listen to you, are you also saying that is the man able to articulate what that thing is for that wow factor?
And I
do
think
they know that?
And I think that's the struggle, because I think sometimes men don't even know. I think sometimes we don't even know exactly what that is. It is when I am talking to clients, it seems like they are looking for a feeling, this overwhelming feeling, and you're trying to get them to articulate it and put it in. Okay, well, are you looking for these attributes, or are you looking for this? And it is like, men will say, they can say that that's what they're looking for, but they can get those things. I see them get those things. I'm sitting here looking at the couple. Oh, you got 9 out of 10 of these things, and you still are struggling in this dating relationship. So they're waiting for this overwhelming feeling to just knock them off their feet, and to have them, there's this perception from men that they are giving up their freedom by going into a long-term or marriage relationship. And men don't understand that most studies show that men who are married, they live longer, they're in better health, that it really benefits them. But that perception of, I'm not gonna be able to do what I wanna do, I'm gonna lose my freedom, what if I meet somebody better? All of that is rumbling around in their heads and hearts.
And what I also hear you saying is that if it's this feeling, that it might not be anything the woman can do.
Right? It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, he's looking for this feeling, let me give it to him. It's something that may be kind of unspoken. It's the vibe. It's the vibe between them. It may be the sum total of all of who she is, not, oh, I can do that, I can cook better. Or, I can, watch football with them. That it's the sum total of who she is, which, for me as a woman, if I were dating, that might be a relief, because,
that's what I was gonna say,
it might be a relief because it's not me. It's just that we don't mesh. It's, this is not a good fit, so I can move on and find someone who is. And also another thing that you said brought up for me. We've heard, if you've kind of listened to any of the dating coaches and movies and things like that, they talk about, you said this person has 9 of the 10, but this man is still thinking, what if I meet somebody else better, or what? So it reminds me of, you heard of that 80-20 rule, they say. So the 80-20 rule is, that a person will be in a relationship and they have 80% of what they're looking for. And they'll meet someone who has just that 20%, and they will leave the 80 to go for that 20. And be 80% more miserable than they were or lonely, or, not fulfilled as they were in that relationship. I mean, is there any way to combat that? Like, how do you help folks understand that that's a little faulty thinking? That really makes no sense.
It's helping them to understand. Often this happens because there was a previous relationship, usually right before, where there was something like, I'll use an example of a clients that I was working with. And the situation was this young woman was not going to be with someone who would not pay for dates and do things, because in her previous relationship, she had a guy who just kind of, where she dealt with that, and he never really stepped up to the plate, and that was an issue. And so now she goes into this new relationship with a man from everything that I can see is not did not want to do that for her, just wondered why it was such a big thing and why he had to do it all of the time. You know, very generous, well put together, seemed like the guy was a catch. And she ended it. And she may have missed out on a really good thing just because she hadn't done her healing from her previous relationship.
Now, if that isn't relationship 101, I mean, how many of the relationships, Bishop said, we all walking around with baggage. You need to know what baggage you are carrying so that you can also understand how it may or may not show up in your relationships or impact the decisions that you're making, because that's ideally, you know, what we're talking about. And I often think about how many people are actually have done that very thing, missed out on a potentially really good mate because they did not meet one specific criteria on their list. You know, speaking of lists, do you see that? Working with some women and men in dating relationships, are people still operating with lists?
Not necessarily in the literal sense, but yeah, they have these things in their mind that they are looking for in the relationship. They're looking for someone who is educated, someone who is well put together and fit. They're looking for someone who they have good conversation, good vibe with, right? They are looking for those things. They're looking for someone who may be a person of faith, who wants children, who comes from a family where they're getting along, and you know, and family is important. There's all types of things and reasons why, you know, people have lists. But the key, I think it goes back to what Erica was talking about earlier. You know, you've got to understand that you're not going to get everything.
Right.
But is that something that you can live with?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it is. And it should be said that I don't want it to be lists are not important because everyone needs to know what it is that they, you know, deserve. But we have, you know, I can think of people who have lists where, his eyes have to be deep set. Or, you know, his nose has to look a certain way, or, you know what, that proverbial six-pack. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but in the bigger scheme of things, how important are those little tiny, tiny things? And I think that's what people are often overlooking and missing out on.
Yeah, and you know, that brings up, you know, me thinking about my book, Dating with Purpose. I don't think that there's anything wrong with lists, but what I argue for in my book is that those things that are kind of like must-haves, that are like non-negotiables, those things should be those things that you kind of mentioned, which are value related, related to values and unchanging. But those things that are negotiable should be the things that you mentioned, which are those things that can change over time. You want somebody 6 feet, well, if you're together forever, by the time y'all pass away at 100, he gonna be 5'10" because you lose inches. So those things are gonna change. You want somebody who is extremely beautiful. Well, that's great, but beauty changes over time.
Yes,
you know, not everybody's gonna look like Lena Horne at 80. So, you know, there are gonna be some wrinkles. There's gonna be gray hairs. So those things are changing, which means that they should be negotiable. They should not be set in stone. It's like if he has everything on my values list, you know, loves family, believes in God, opens doors and feels like one and all of these things, but he's 5'11" instead of 6'1". I'm gonna let that go. And people let it go.
Right.
People let it go.
Wear some flats.
And then they said, wear some flats. There's some cute with some rhinestones on them and keep it pushing. But people do that and then they're just like, I can't find a good person.
Absolutely.
I can't find a good man. Or even, and men will say that about women. Like, I can't, you know, because she's not a size 6 and or is built like, you know, somebody in social media or whatever. No, I'm, right? And then at home, like, I know good women out there. So, you know, I think it's really important. It kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about them carrying their own stuff, like her breaking up with the guy because he wouldn't pay because of what she had experienced before.
Absolutely.
And this idea of baggage. So what I hear you saying is it's so important to look within. So you could have your list for them, but you need to know what's going on with you and what you're bringing into relationship.
Yes.
So, Jeff, thinking, you know, knowing that we have identified the hallmarks, if you will, about the challenges that, people experience in relationships. What would you say, what are some things that people can do when they begin to get involved in the dating life, or if they're looking for a relationship, what are some of the first things that they can do?
Okay, so I'm gonna take this as this is a person who's already done their work. Right?
Okay.
Because
Okay.
you got to do your work.
You're right.
And so this is a person going into a dating relationship. First, the first one is to date often. Date liberally. Bishop was talking about that principle of participation,
Yes.
right? The work that you have to do. That work is going and getting out. When you're invited to things where there may be other single people around, actually go. Get out there and go on dates and do those things. The other part is living a very full life as well while you're dating, right? Because we are our most attractive when we are doing things that we love, and so my wife might be looking at this right now and finding me very attractive. I might get lucky, just because I am doing something that I love, right?
Yeah.
Talking about something that I love. The next thing would be really be observant, right? When you're going into these situations, observe how this person is interacting with others, how this person is treating you, and observe for a period of time. So I think what happens is we can be so eager to get into situations that we don't observe for, like one of my mentors would say, you gotta observe people for a season. I know we live in Southern California, in Inglewood, and we don't get the 4 seasons, but there are seasons, and you wanna see how that person responds when things are well,
Right.
when things aren't so well, and so you wanna be able to observe. The next thing is to believe what it is that you are actually observing. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of things that we see, and we minimize.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about that Maya Angelou quote where it's just like when a person tells you who they are, believe them, right? I looked up that quote to make sure that was her and make sure that I got it right. And I saw that there's another part at the end where she says, believe them the first time.
Right.
And so, Dr. Angelou was trying to save us some time, and
heartache.
And so there's that part of it, right? It's believing them. And then after that, it is behave accordingly. Once you've seen it, you got the data. You then have to make the decision to behave accordingly. You're going to weed some people out. Some people are going to disqualify themselves based on some of the behavior and the things that you've observed. And it's important to behave accordingly and get out of those situations as gracefully as one can. Or this person continues to show up and show that they are, as interested and as engaged and meets a lot of your criteria, behaving accordingly there as well and saying, you know what, I'm going to be vulnerable in this situation and I'm going to show more of myself and I'm going to try to create that intimacy. So those are the things I think people can do.
I love it. So date often
Yes.
and get out and put yourself in places where you can get dates. I love that. And then, date them for a season so you can collect data. And believe the data you collect.
Absolutely.
Right. Believe the data. And some people going to weed themselves off, so go on to the next, which is why if you're dating, right? If you're dating often, then you can do that. I think you have left us with some amazing, amazing gems. Now, the way that we like to close out this show is we always want to leave our viewers with some resources, some things that they can continue to kind of investigate for themselves, to gain knowledge and to get some tools and skills. So I see you've brought 2 books here for us. Can you talk about this first one, Scream-Free Marriage?
Scream-Free Marriage is one of my favorite books on marriage and just relationships. There's some relationship jewels in there as well. And the main thing about that book is really doing your work. The only thing that you can control in a relationship is you. And it is controlling your emotional reactivity, how you show up in the relationship, how you love, even how you argue, all of those things. And I love the fact that he puts the onus back on us on how we show up. And I think if everyone's doing their work and showing up well, then the relationship has a greater chance of success. And so that's that one.
So Scream-Free Marriage, Calming Down, Growing Up, and Getting Closer by Hal Edward Runkle, LMFT, is available on Amazon. And then you brought us another jewel here, The Gifts of Perfection by Brene Brown. I love Brene Brown.
Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection, is one of those books that I use constantly to help people do their work. When we talked about doing their work, it is examining yourself. It is getting rid of the shame, because she's a shame researcher. And so it is dealing with those things around shame and healing from that and getting to a place where you can open up your heart again, where you can be what she refers to as the wholehearted. And she says that without vulnerability, there is no true intimacy. And so it is learning how to get to a place of vulnerability so that you can get the intimacy that you crave.
Wow,
Right.
That's The Gifts of Imperfection, Letting Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are by Brene Brown, PhD. Again, available on Amazon and is a New York Times bestsellers list. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being with us today. Very quickly, tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me at buildingqualityrelationships.com. I have a private practice there. Just here to serve the community and help people improve their relationships. And even if that relationship is yourself, if you're doing your own work.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us. And thank you all for tuning in again this week. Until next time, we pray that you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
It's not too late to change, it's time to be the change. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. It's not too late to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, time to change, time to change.